Welcome to Mystery Manor Tales. I'm your host, Evelyn Whitaker. Dear listeners, settle in with a cup of tea or perhaps a cozy blanket. Today, we're embarking on a thrilling journey back to the 1920s with the incomparable Hercule Poirot. If you're new here, we specialize in immersive mystery stories told in the grand tradition of Agatha Christie, perfect for relaxing evenings or long commutes. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. London, perhaps, or somewhere more exotic like the Orient. Hit that like button if you're ready for twists and turns, and subscribe for more tales that keep you guessing. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The fog clung to the rails like wet wool, as the boat train from Dover rattled northward through the night. Hercule Poirot sat alone in his first-class compartment, legs neatly crossed, gloved hands resting upon the silver knob of his cane. The little Belgian detective disliked English fog. It was untidy, it obscured truth, and it made the moustaches droop. Yet even the fog could not dampen the satisfaction he felt at being summoned once more into the arena where his genius shone brightest. The affairs of the rich, the desperate, and the murderous. Across from him, on the opposite seat, lay the telegram that had torn him from the comforts of his London flat. The paper was expensive, the handwriting hurried yet decisive. Poirot, Whitehaven House, London. Fear grave trouble. Stop Eye of Osiris threatened. Stop come at once to Blackthorn Manor. Eldridge, Wiltshire, stop will meet train. Thursday stop trust no one. Reginald Hargrove. Poirot turned the flimsy sheet between his fingers, noting the tremor in the final letters. Sir Reginald Hargrove was not a man given to panic. During the war, he had commanded a brigade in Mesopotamia with cool nerve. In the years since, he had built a fortune in cotton and armaments with the same icy determination. For such a man to write, "Trust no one," something had pierced the armour at last. The train sighed into a country station where only one lamp burned. A liveried chauffeur stood waiting beside a gleaming dark blue Rolls-Royce Phantom. He touched his cap. "Mr. Poirot, Sir Reginald's compliments, sir. The motor is this way." Poirot permitted himself to be handed into the back seat, as though he were royalty. The car purred away from the little platform, and was soon swallowed by lanes so narrow that the hedgerows scraped the paintwork like impatient fingers. Gradually, the ground rose. The air grew sharper, scented with wood smoke and wet leaves. Then, quite suddenly, the headlights swept across wrought-iron gates flanked by stone griffins, and beyond them Blackthorn Manor rose against the night sky. A great Tudor pile of blackened beams and diamond-paned windows, half fortress, half palace, crowned with twisted chimneys, that seemed to lean together in conspiratorial gossip. The gravel crunched beneath the tires. Torches, actual flaming torches, flared in iron brackets beside the entrance, casting pools of orange light and long, dancing shadows. The front door, heavy oak studded with iron, stood open. Sir Reginald himself waited upon the threshold, taller than Poirot remembered, but stooped now, as though some invisible weight pressed upon his shoulders. "My dear Poirot," he said, seizing the detective's hand in a grip that was feverishly hot, "thank God you have come." Sir Reginald Hargrove was in his 56th year, broad-shouldered still, with iron-grey hair cropped close, and a moustache that had once been the terror of subalterns. Tonight the moustache drooped. The eyes were red-rimmed. He wore evening dress. But the black tie hung awry, and the starched shirt front bore a small stain of claret. "You will take a glass of brandy," he said rather than asked, leading the way across a cavernous hall where armour stood in serried ranks, and a log fire roared up a chimney wide enough to stable a pony. You will need it. The thing is worse, far worse, than I dared put in a telegram. They passed beneath a minstrel's gallery into a small panelled room that smelled of beeswax, old leather, and the faint sweetness of hothouse flowers. A single lamp with a green silk shade burned upon a mahogany desk. Its light glittered on the crystal decanters and threw the rest of the room into soft shadow. Sir Reginald poured 2 generous measures. His hand shook. Brandy slopped upon the Persian rug. "Forgive me," he muttered. "I have not slept since Tuesday." Poirot accepted the glass but did not drink. He placed his hat and cane upon a chair with geometrical precision, and regarded his host with the calm, bright eyes of a bird. "Tell me, mon ami," he said gently. "Begin at the beginning. What is this Eye of Osiris that causes you such distress?" Sir Reginald sank into a leather wing chair, as though his legs had betrayed him. "It is a sapphire," he said, voice low. "Not large, barely the size of a pigeon's egg, but of a colour and clarity I have never seen equalled. Deep blue at the centre, yet shot through with a crimson spark, like a flame trapped beneath ice. It came into my family's possession in 1843, taken, or let us say acquired, by my great-grandfather, General Sir Hugo Hargrove, during the Egyptian campaign. The natives called it the Eye of Osiris. They said it had once adorned the forehead of a god in a lost temple near Thebes. There is a curse, of course. There is always a curse." He gave a short, bitter laugh that held no amusement. "Superstition, I told myself. Yet 3 men who owned it before me died violently. My own father kept it locked away and would never speak of it. When he died, fell from his horse on a perfectly clear day, I inherited the thing along with Blackthorn. I swore I would break the pattern. I had the stone mounted in a simple gold band, nothing ostentatious, and placed it in a wall safe behind the portrait in my study. Only I know the combination. Only I possess the key to the study door. And yet he drained his glass at a gulp. 3 nights ago I opened the safe to reassure myself, as I do every month. The velvet-lined box was there. I lifted the lid, and the eye was gone. In its place lay a scrap of papyrus. Genuine papyrus, I have no doubt, covered with hieroglyphs. I cannot read them, but the meaning was clear enough. Beneath the writing, someone had drawn in bright crimson ink a single staring eye. Poirot's brows ascended a fraction. "You are certain no one else knows the combination?" "Certain? No, but I change it every year on my birthday. The present sequence is known to no living soul but myself. And the key? There is only one. I wear it always on a chain about my neck." Sir Reginald pulled open his shirt to reveal a small steel key on a fine gold chain. "Even my wife does not have a duplicate." Poirot sipped at last, rolling the brandy across his tongue. "You mentioned in your telegram that the eye is threatened, not merely stolen. There is more?" Sir Reginald rose and paced, a caged lion in evening dress. "I have received letters, 3 in the past fortnight. They come by post, no address posted in London. The first demanded £50,000 for the stone safe return. I ignored it. Blackmailers do not frighten me. The second warned that if I involve the police, the eye would be smashed to powder. The third arrived this morning." He stopped before the fireplace, staring into the flames. "It says that unless I pay £100,000 by midnight on Saturday, not only will the sapphire be destroyed, but someone in this house will die." A log shifted in the grate. Sparks flew up like startled fireflies. "That is why I sent for you," Sir Reginald continued, voice rough. "The local constabulary are good men, but this is beyond them. And Scotland Yard, well, the fewer official feet tramping about, the better. My weekend guests arrive tomorrow. I cannot cancel without explanation. Tongues would wag, the press would descend. I need you to be here, ostensibly as my guest, to watch, to listen, to prevent murder if you can, and above all, to recover the eye before Saturday. Poirot set his glass aside. You have, perhaps, suspicions? Sir Reginald hesitated. This house is full of people who might profit from my ruin. My nephew Victor, heavy losses on the stock exchange, always needing money. My wife's friend, Clara Beaumont, actress, charming, but actresses have expensive tastes. Dr. Thorne has been treating Amelia for nervous headaches. He knows the house well, knows my habits. And Colonel Blackwell, old comrade, but he was with my great-grandfather in Egypt. He has spent a lifetime collecting antiquities, some say by means less than honourable. He spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. Any one of them could have engineered the theft, or someone else entirely. Servants, a professional gang. I no longer know whom to trust. Poirot rose, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from his coat. Then trust Hercule Poirot, he said simply. I accept your hospitality, mon ami. Tomorrow your guests arrive, and the little game begins. You will present me as an old friend from Belgium, a collector of Egyptian antiquities, perhaps. It is a role I can play to perfection. Sir Reginald managed a wintry smile. I have prepared the peacock room for you, best view in the house. And Poirot. He gripped the detective's arm. Whatever happens, do not let them see that you are anything more than a harmless foreign guest. Poirot inclined his head. Have no fear. The moustaches of Poirot are celebrated, but his discretion is legendary. A gong boomed solemnly through the corridors. Dinner for the depleted household. Sir Reginald straightened his tie. Come, he said, my wife is anxious to meet you. And after dinner, I will show you the scene of the crime. Together they stepped into the flickering torchlight of the great hall, where already the shadows seemed to deepen, and the ancient suits of armour to lean a little forward, as though eager for the drama about to unfold beneath the blackened beams of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 2. The vanishing act morning crept over Blackthorn Manor like a guilty thing, pale and reluctant. A thin drizzle drifted from a sky the colour of wet slate, smearing the mullioned windows and laying a damp hush across the lawns. Inside the house, the servants moved with unusual quiet, as though the very walls were listening. Hercule Poirot descended the sweeping oak staircase at precisely 20 minutes past 8. Immaculate in dove-grey suit and spats, the points of his moustache waxed to needle sharpness. He had slept well. The peacock room, with its four-poster bed and faded emerald hangings, had been surprisingly comfortable, and the silence of the countryside had soothed rather than disturbed him. Yet the moment his patent leather shoes touched the checkered tiles of the hall, he sensed the tremor in the air, the same tremor that precedes an earthquake. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace beneath a portrait of a fierce-eyed ancestor in the uniform of a Napoleonic hussar. He was already dressed for the day in tweeds, but the jacket hung loose upon his frame, and his face was the colour of old parchment. When he saw Poirot, he came forward quickly, hands half raised as if to ward off a blow. "It has happened again," he said, the words cracking like a whip. "This time there can be no doubt. Come quickly." Without waiting for reply, he strode toward the west wing, boots ringing on the flagstones. Poirot followed, noting the rigidity of his host's shoulders, the way the man's fingers worried at the pipe in his pocket without ever filling it. They passed through a green baize door, and along a narrower corridor, lined with sporting prints and glass cases of stuffed trout. At the far end stood a heavy door of polished mahogany. Sir Reginald produced the steel key from the chain about his neck and turned it with a click that sounded unnaturally loud. He pushed the door inward. The study was a room of masculine comfort. Walls panelled in dark oak, a turkey carpet the colour of claret, a massive partner's desk beneath a window that looked out upon dripping yew trees. A fire had been laid but not lit. The air carried the faint staleness of yesterday's cigars and something else, something sharper, metallic. Sir Reginald crossed to the far wall where hung a life-size portrait of his great-grandfather, General Sir Hugo Hargrove, resplendent in scarlet tunic and plumed shako, one gloved hand resting upon the hilt of a sabre. The baronet pressed the ornate gilt frame at a precise point. It swung outward on concealed hinges to reveal a small Chubb safe let into the wall. The safe door stood open. Inside lay nothing but a square of black velvet, and upon it another scrap of ancient papyrus. Even from where he stood, Poirot could see the crimson drawing of the staring eye. Sir Reginald's voice was barely above a whisper. "I locked this safe myself at 11 o'clock last night. I was the last person in this room. The door to the corridor was locked and bolted on the inside. The windows are barred and have not been touched, yet the eye is gone again." Poirot stepped forward, eyes glittering. He examined the safe without touching it. The combination dial was set to 0. There were no scratches, no signs of forcing. The papyrus fragment bore the same hieroglyphic text as before, the ink still faintly wet. He lifted it delicately between gloved fingers and sniffed once. "Indian ink," he murmured, "mixed with oil of bergamot. Curious." He turned his attention to the room itself. The windows were indeed fastened. The bars were old but solid, cemented deep into the stone. The fireplace was wide, but the chimney narrowed sharply 6 feet above the grate. No adult could descend it. The floorboards were tight, the carpet undisturbed save for a single set of footprints, leading from door to safe and back again. Sir Reginald's own brogues, clearly imprinted. Poirot crouched, studying the prints. They were crisp, the pressure even. He measured the distance between heel and toe with his pocket rule, then straightened. "Tell me exactly what occurred after dinner last night." Sir Reginald passed a hand across his brow. "We played bridge in the drawing-room until 10:30. Amelia complained of headache and retired. The others drifted off one by one, Victor to the billiard-room, Clara to write letters, Thorne to the library, Blackwell to smoke on the terrace. I came here to work on some papers. At 11, I opened the safe to reassure myself the eye was still there. It was. I locked the safe, swung the portrait back, locked and bolted the study door from the inside, and went to bed by the servants, stared to avoid disturbing anyone. My bedroom is directly above this room. I heard nothing in the night." Poirot's gaze travelled to the ceiling, and this morning, "I rose at 7, dressed, and came straight here. The door was still bolted on the inside. I had to unbolt it to enter. The safe was as you see it." The little Belgian gave a soft exclamation of satisfaction. "Perfect! A locked room within a locked room. The crime impossible, therefore the solution must be exquisite." He moved to the desk. Upon the blotter lay a single sheet of Sir Reginald's crested notepaper. Someone had written upon it in bold capitals, "Midnight, Saturday the Eye, sees all pay or perish." The ink was still the same crimson, the bergamot scent unmistakable. Sir Reginald stared at the message as though it were a death warrant. 4 days, he said hoarsely. 4 days until someone in this house dies." Poirot folded the note with care and slipped it into his pocketbook. "Courage, mon ami. Hercule Poirot is here, and already the little grey cells dance. But first we must meet your guests. They arrive on the noon train, n'est-ce pas? Good. Let us greet them with smiles while we watch for the flicker of fear behind their eyes, for somewhere among the welcome and the handshakes walks the person who entered this room last night without opening door or window, who opened a safe no one but you can open, and who left behind the scent of bergamot and the promise of murder." He clapped Sir Reginald lightly on the shoulder. "Come, let us take coffee in the morning room, and you will tell me, very precisely, who in this house knows that you check the safe every night at 11 o'clock. As they left the study, Poirot paused on the threshold and looked back once, slowly, thoughtfully, at the empty safe yawning behind the portrait like a blind eye in the wall. Then he closed the door softly, and the click of the lock sounded, in the hush of the manor, like the closing of a trap. Chapter 3. The Guests Arrive. The noon train from Paddington wheezed into Eldridge Station exactly on time, trailing a plume of white steam that hung in the damp air like a bridal veil. Poirot stood beside Sir Reginald on the platform, outwardly the picture of urbane leisure in a long charcoal overcoat and grey suede gloves, inwardly alert as a cat at a mouse-hole. A porter trundled luggage. The station-master touched his cap. Somewhere a horse in the nearby field whinnied at the scent of coal smoke. First down from the first-class carriage was Victor Hargrove, Sir Reginald's nephew, and heir presumptive. 28, tall, almost too handsome, with sleek fair hair and the slightly feverish eyes of a man who has been losing heavily at cards. He wore a camel hair coat with an astrakhan collar and carried a silver-topped cane he plainly did not need. His greeting to his uncle was loud, almost defiant. "Uncle Reggie, still burying yourself in this mausoleum, I see. You really ought to come up to town more often. The old place is enough to give one the blue devils." Sir Reginald's reply was civil, but cool. Victor's glance flicked to Poirot, registered the perfect moustache and the patent shoes, and dismissed him as harmless foreign ornamentation. Next came Miss Clara Beaumont, swirling down from the carriage in a whirlwind of sable fur and perfume. She was perhaps 30, with copper-bright hair fashionably shingled and a mouth painted the colour of fresh, arterial blood. Her laugh rang out like breaking glass. "Reggie, darling, how perfectly dreadful to drag us all down to the country in this weather. I shall expire of boredom before dinner." She allowed Sir Reginald to kiss her gloved fingers, then turned the full battery of her smile upon Poirot. "And who is this exquisite little man?" "Permit me," Poirot murmured, bowing over her hand with continental grace. "Hercule Poirot, at your service, mademoiselle, a humble collector of Egyptian antiquities, invited by Sir Reginald to admire his treasures." Clara's eyes widened theatrically. "Oh, the famous eye. Amelia wrote me pages about it. I long to see the naughty thing." Dr. Elias Thorne followed more sedately, a thin, stooped man of 50, with a scholar's stoop and gold-rimmed spectacles that flashed in the weak sunlight. He carried a worn leather doctor's bag and greeted Sir Reginald with the quiet familiarity of a man who has prescribed sedatives to the household for years. "Reginald, Lady Amelia wired that her headaches have returned. I brought the new German compound." His gaze, sharp behind the lenses, rested on Poirot for a moment longer than courtesy required, then moved on. Last came Colonel Marcus Blackwell, descending stiffly with the aid of a Malacca cane. He was a big, ruddy man in his early 60s, dressed in an old tweed shooting jacket with leather patches at the elbows. His moustache was magnificent, walrus-like, and his voice carried the bark of the parade ground. "Hargrove, you old villain! Still hoarding that cursed bauble, eh? Mark my words, it'll be the death of someone yet." He pumped Sir Reginald's hand vigorously, then turned to Poirot. "And who's this, hey? Don't tell me you've taken to keeping a tame Egyptologist." Sir Reginald performed the introduction smoothly, while the chauffeur loaded trunks into the second motor. Within minutes, both cars were gliding up the winding drive to Blackthorn, the passengers exclaiming at the Gothic silhouette rising through the mist. In the great hall, Lady Amelia awaited them. She was pale, beautiful in a fragile hothouse way, wearing a tea gown of smoke-grey chiffon that made her seem half-ghost already. Her handshake was cool, her smile tremulous. "Mr. Poirot, how good of you to come all this way. My husband speaks so highly of your discernment." Poirot bowed. "Madame, the pleasure is mine. I confess I have heard much of the famous Eye of Osiris. One does not often have the opportunity to view a gem with such a colourful reputation." A shadow crossed her face. "Reputation, yes. Sometimes I wish Reginald had never brought it into the house." Luncheon was announced almost at once. Thin soup, cold game pie, a salad of forced endive, eaten beneath the stern gaze of ancestral portraits. Conversation danced carefully around the subject that occupied every mind. Victor spoke loudly of the latest review at the Criterion. Clara recounted scandalous gossip from the theatrical world. Colonel Blackwell told, for the third time, the story of finding a mummy's hand in a Cairo bazaar. Dr. Thorne said little, merely observing the company with the detached interest of a man cataloguing symptoms. Poirot ate sparingly, watching. He noted how Victor's fingers drummed incessantly upon the tablecloth, how Clara's gaze kept straying to the jewel case on the mantel. Empty, but she could not know that. How Dr. Thorne's eyes behind the spectacles never ceased their quiet measurement of pulse and pupil and tremor. After the meal, the party dispersed. Victor to the billiard room, Clara to rest before tea, the Colonel for a tramp across the sodden park with a gun he did not intend to fire, Dr. Thorne to consult privately with Lady Amelia. Poirot accepted Sir Reginald's offer of coffee in the library, and, the moment the door closed, dropped the mask of polite guest. "Now," he said briskly, "we begin. You will show me the exact positions of every soul in this house last night, between 11 o'clock and 7 this morning. You will provide me with a plan of the West Wing, the servants' stair, the attics, and you will tell me, without omission, every peculiar incident of the past fortnight, no matter how trivial." Sir Reginald obeyed like a man in a trance, spreading papers across the library table. Poirot listened, green eyes luminous, interrupting only to clarify a measurement or a time. When the baronet finished, Poirot tapped the plan thoughtfully. "Bien. One thing is clear. The thief either possesses wings, or he possesses a key, or a most ingenious duplicate. Also, he knows your habits to the minute. That narrows our circle delightfully." He folded the plan and tucked it into his pocket. "And now, if you will excuse me, I think I shall take a little tour of the house, alone. One sees more clearly when not accompanied by the owner, who flinches at every shadow." Sir Reginald made as if to protest, then thought better of it. "Very well, but Poirot, be careful. Whoever did this has already stolen the eye twice and threatened murder. I should not like the third crime to be against you." Poirot's smile was almost mischievous. "Have no fear, my friend. It is not Hercule Poirot, who will be in danger this weekend. It is the criminal who should begin to tremble, for already the little grey cells are arranging the facts in their proper order. And very pretty that order is becoming. He gave a small, satisfied nod, adjusted the angle of his hat to the precise degree he favoured, and slipped out into the corridor like a sleek black cat intent upon serious mousing. Behind him, unnoticed in the excitement, the long case clock in the hall struck 2 with a sombre, measured voice, as though counting down the hours remaining until midnight on Saturday, chapter 4th. Footprints in the dust. Poirot began his solitary exploration at the top of the house and worked downward, moving with the silence of a man who has learned that floorboards betray more than people do. The attic stretched the full length of Blackthorn. A warren of sloping ceilings, iron-bound trunks, and discarded furniture draped in grey holland covers that looked, in the dim light from dormer windows, like crouching ghosts. Dust lay thick upon everything. The air smelled of mouse droppings and ancient cedar. He walked slowly, eyes sweeping left and right, the beam of a small electric torch, a recent acquisition from the Army and Navy stores, cutting a cold white circle ahead of him. Halfway along the central passage, he stopped. A single set of footprints marred the dust, small, narrow, the mark of a woman's court shoe with a fashionable Louis heel. They began at the servant's stair, crossed to a dormer that overlooked the west wing roof, and returned the same way. The return prints were deeper, as though the walker had been carrying something on the way back. Poirot crouched, touched the edge of one print with a gloved fingertip, and nodded to himself. Less than 24 hours old, the dust had not yet resettled evenly. He followed the trail to the dormer. The window opened easily. Rain had swollen the frame, but the catch had been forced quite recently. From here a desperate person might lower themselves onto the slate roof of the west wing, perhaps using the thick ivy as handhold. Possible, but perilous in the dark. He closed the window and continued, cataloguing, a broken cobweb here, a displaced trunk lid there, a faint smear of green mould on a brass handle where a wet hand had grasped it. Nothing dramatic, yet everything significant. Descending to the first floor, he moved along the guest corridor. The doors stood innocently ajar, fires laid but not lit, hot water cans cooling outside each room. He paused at Miss Clara Beaumont's door. The scent of her perfume, heavy jasmine and something sharper like verbena, lingered in the air. Inside, the room was chaos. Evening gowns flung across the bed, pots of cream and sticks of grease paint scattered over the dressing table, a copy of The Stage Open at the Theatrical Situations column. On the blotter lay a half-finished letter. "Darling, if only you could see this ghastly house. The old man is positively haunted by that wretched sapphire and—" Poirot read no further. On the carpet beneath the window, he found what he sought, a faint crescent of dried mud, the exact shape and size of the Louis heel he had seen in the attic dust. He pocketed the fragment in a small envelope. Victor Hargrove's room was at the far end, Spartan by comparison. A few sporting prints, a pile of unpaid bills weighted down by a silver cigarette case, and, on the writing desk, a leather-bound betting book showing losses that made even Poirot's eyebrows ascend. Beneath the window, the carpet bore a different mark, a smudge of wet leaf mould, and, beside it, the clear outline of a man's brogue, size 9, the same as Victor wore. Yet the window itself was fastened tight, the catch stiff with disuse. Dr. Thorne's room smelled of carbolic and ether. Everything was arranged with clinical precision. Medical journals stacked alphabetically, a small portable pharmacy in a walnut case. On the night table lay a prescription pad. Several sheets had been torn off recently. Poirot opened the wardrobe. Hanging among the sombre suits was a dark lantern, the kind used by burglars, its bull's-eye lens still faintly warm. Colonel Blackwell's chamber resembled an outpost of the Empire. Campaign chests, a tiger skin complete with head, a locked gun cabinet, and on a side table, a framed photograph of a younger Blackwell standing beside General Hargrove in the desert. Both men sunburned and smiling. A camel kneeling behind them. On the floorboards near the fireplace, Poirot discovered a scatter of fine sand, not the coarse builder's sand of England, but pale gold, almost white. He collected a pinch in another envelope, labelled it Sahara in neat pencil. By the time he reached the ground floor again, the short winter afternoon was already dying. He slipped into the West Wing corridor, unobserved, and stood for a long moment before the study door, visualizing the impossible events of the previous night. Then he entered, locking the door behind him as Sir Reginald had done. The room felt colder now, the empty safe a dark mouth behind the portrait. Poirot went straight to the fireplace. The ashes were cold, but when he stirred them with the poker, he uncovered a scrap of half-burnt paper, a corner of papyrus, the crimson eye still visible. Someone had attempted to destroy evidence and been interrupted. He examined the windows again, this time from the inside. One bar, the third from the left, showed the faintest bright scratch where metal had recently scraped metal. The bars were cemented deep, but a determined man with a cold chisel and a muffling cloth might loosen one in an hour's careful work. He measured the gap, barely 9 inches. No adult could pass through. Yet something had. Poirot stepped back, hands clasped behind him, and allowed his gaze to travel slowly around the room. Bookcases filled with Morocco-bound volumes, a bronze bust of Caesar, a Persian rug whose pattern of medallions suddenly caught his attention. One medallion, directly in front of the safe, was fractionally out of alignment, turned perhaps 2 inches clockwise. He knelt and lifted the rug. Beneath lay a small brass plate set flush with the floorboards. When he pressed it, a narrow panel slid aside with a soft click, revealing a black cavity no wider than a man's arm. A draught of cold, damp air rose from it, carrying the unmistakable smell of the river that ran at the foot of the hill. A priest's hole, or perhaps an old smuggler's shaft. Blackthorn was riddled with such relics. The opening was too narrow for a body, but a gloved hand might reach up, swing the portrait, work the combination if one knew it, and withdraw the jewel case with the aid of a slender pair of tongs. The rug would hide everything afterwards. Poirot sat back on his heels, eyes glittering brighter than the missing sapphire. "Magnifique," he murmured. "So the ghost has a perfectly material arm." He replaced the panel, smoothed the rug, and rose. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 4. Tea would be served in the drawing-room. The suspects would gather, curious, uneasy, each wondering how much the others knew. Poirot permitted himself the smallest of smiles. The hunt was no longer blind. The little grey cells had found their first true path through the labyrinth, and the scent, bergamot, jasmine, Sahara sand, and river water, was growing warmer by the minute. Chapter 5. The storm breaks. Tea in the drawing-room was a brittle affair. Rain lashed the tall windows like thrown gravel. Wind moaned in the chimneys, and set the tapestries fluttering as though the house itself were breathing in short, angry gasps. The guests sat in a loose circle around the fire, teacups rattling in nervous fingers, conversation starting and dying like matches in a draught. Lady Amelia, pale as the lace at her throat, poured with a hand that trembled so badly that Clara had to steady the spout. Victor drank his tea laced with whiskey from a pocket flask and stared moodily at the flames. Dr. Thorne sat a little apart, turning the pages of a medical journal without reading them. Colonel Blackwell stood with his back to the mantel, legs planted wide, rocking slightly on his heels, as old soldiers do when remembering parades. Poirot accepted a cup of lapsang souchong and a single petit beurre biscuit, then placed himself in a small velvet chair from which he could observe every face. He looked, to all appearances, merely a polite foreign guest waiting for the storm to pass. In reality, his eyes flicked from pupil to pupil, noting dilation, noting the tiny muscle that jumped at the corner of Victor's mouth, the way Clara's painted nails worried at a loose thread on her skirt. Sir Reginald had not appeared. A message delivered by the butler explained that he was indisposed and would join them for dinner. No one believed it. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken questions until Clara, unable to bear the silence, laughed too brightly. "Really, darlings, one would think someone had died. It's only a jewel after all, a pretty bauble with a nasty reputation. Surely Reggie has it tucked away in a bank vault and is simply having us on." Victor gave a short, ugly laugh. If only. Uncle Reggie would sooner part with his right arm than let the eye out of this house. Dr. Thorne closed his journal with a snap. "Obsession is a dangerous condition," he said quietly. "I have warned Sir Reginald for years." Colonel Blackwell snorted. "Warned him? Damned nonsense! The thing's worth a fortune. Any man would guard it." Poirot set his cup down with delicate precision. "And yet, mes amis, someone has guarded it insufficiently, twice." 5 pairs of eyes turned toward him. He smiled benignly. "Forgive the intrusion of shop into the salon, but I am after all a collector. When a treasure such as the Eye of Osiris vanishes from a locked room twice, one becomes curious." Clara's cup clattered into its saucer. "Twice? Mais oui, mademoiselle. Once 3 nights ago, and again last night. The method identical, the threat more urgent. By Saturday midnight, unless ransom is paid, the sapphire will be destroyed and, I quote the latest note, someone in this house will pay with blood." Lady Amelia made a small choked sound and pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Victor swore under his breath. The Colonel's face darkened to the colour of port wine. "That does it," he barked. "I'm going to have a look at this famous safe myself." He strode toward the door. The others rose as though pulled by strings. Poirot made no move to stop them. On the contrary, he followed at a leisurely pace, murmuring, "An excellent idea. Let us all examine the impossible together." They trooped along the corridor like a funeral procession, the wind rattling the windows as though applauding their unease. Sir Reginald met them at the study door, haggard, eyes bloodshot. He had clearly heard every word. "Very well," he said harshly. "Look your fill. Perhaps one of you can explain it." He unlocked the door and flung it wide. The room was exactly as Poirot had left it hours earlier. The portrait swung aside, the safe yawning empty. The scrap of papyrus with its crimson eye, glaring from the velvet. Colonel Blackwell went straight to the rug, rolled it back with military efficiency, and exposed the brass plate. He stared at the concealed shaft, then at Sir Reginald. "Good God, man, you never told me there was a priest's hole here." "It was sealed centuries ago," Sir Reginald answered wearily. "I only discovered it myself last year when the carpenters were in." Victor dropped to his knees and shone an electric torch down the shaft. The beam vanished into blackness. "Narrow as a drainpipe. No one could climb it." "Yet something did," Poirot said softly. Clara shivered theatrically. "Don't. You'll give me the vapours." Dr. Thorne adjusted his spectacles and peered at the safe dial. No scratches. Whoever opened this knew the combination. "Only one man knows it," Sir Reginald snapped. Silence fell, thick and dangerous. Outside, thunder growled over the hills. Lady Amelia broke it, her voice thin. "Reginald, I cannot bear this. The house feels watched. I'm going to lie down." She turned and almost ran from the room. Victor followed her with his eyes, something unreadable in his expression. The Colonel cleared his throat and suggested a whisky. Within minutes the party had fragmented, each retreating to private fears. Dinner that evening was agony. The great chandelier blazed, the silver gleamed, the footman served sole in lobster sauce and saddle of mutton with mechanical correctness, yet every mouthful seemed to stick in the throat. Conversation limped. Sir Reginald drank heavily. Clara tried twice to rally the table with theatrical anecdotes and failed both times. At 10 o'clock, Lady Amelia pleaded headache and withdrew. By 10:30, the gentlemen were left alone with the port. At 11 precisely, Sir Reginald rose, swaying slightly. "I am going to check the safe one last time," he announced. "Then I am bolting myself in this room until morning. No one is to disturb me." He looked hard at each man in turn, as though memorizing faces for a firing squad. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a heavy finality. The others drifted away soon after. Poirot lingered in the hall, listening to footsteps recede, doors shut, keys turn. At length, the house settled into uneasy quiet, broken only by the storm's steady roar. He waited another quarter of an hour, then moved silently to the west wing. The study door was closed, a thin line of light showing beneath it. He placed his ear to the panel. Inside, someone paced, measured agitated steps. Then came the faint click of the portrait hinges, the soft spin of the combination dial, the muted thud of the safe door. Silence. Poirot stepped back into the deeper shadow of a suit of armour and waited, motionless as the carved griffin above the staircase. Minutes passed. The storm reached its height. Rain hammered the roof like bullets. Lightning flickered, turning the corridor momentarily white. In that instant of frozen brilliance, Poirot saw it. A sliver of pale light appearing low down in the wainscot opposite the study door, no larger than a letter slot, there for a heartbeat and gone. He smiled in the darkness, a small, ferocious smile. The ghost had shown its hand at last, and Hercule Poirot now knew exactly where the next act of the drama would be played. Chapter 6. Midnight in the Study. The house clock struck 12 with a deep, mournful note that seemed to come from the very bones of Blackthorn. Thunder answered it at once, rolling across the roof like artillery. Poirot had not moved from his post beside the suit of armour. He stood as still as the iron knight above him. Breathing shallowly, every sense tuned to the corridor. The thin blade of light low in the wainscot had vanished as quickly as it appeared, but Poirot's memory had photographed its exact position. Directly opposite the study door, at the height of a kneeling man's eyes. He counted slowly to 100, then glided forward and knelt in the same spot. His gloved fingers found the tiny brass catch he expected. A panel no wider than a prayer book slid aside without a sound. Beyond lay blackness and the cold, wet smell of the shaft. Poirot did not hesitate. He drew a small electric torch from his pocket, switched it to its narrowest beam, and lowered himself into the opening feet first. The shaft was barely wider than his shoulders. Brick walls scraped his coat, and centuries of soot came away on the gloves. He descended perhaps 15 feet before his shoes touched stone. The passage turned sharply right and ran horizontally beneath the west wing floor, just high enough for a stooping man. The air was thick and river-cold. He advanced slowly, counting paces. At the 20th, he found what he sought. A second vertical shaft rising straight up into darkness. A slender rope ladder, new and tar-smelling, hung down it. Someone had prepared this route with care. Poirot climbed. The ladder ended at another sliding panel. He eased it open a fraction and found himself looking into the study from floor level, directly beneath the partner's desk. The room was lit by a single green-shaded lamp. Sir Reginald sat at the desk, head bowed over a sheet of writing paper, pen motionless in his hand. The safe stood open behind the portrait. The black velvet box lay on the blotter before him, lid raised. Inside, the eye of Osiris blazed with sullen crimson fire. Sir Reginald was speaking aloud, voice hoarse and shaking. "I know you can hear me," he said to the empty room. "You've won. £100,000. Leave it on the hall table at dawn, and the stone will be returned. No police, no more threats, I swear it." Silence answered him, broken only by the storm. Poirot watched, motionless. Sir Reginald waited, knuckles white on the edge of the desk. When no reply came, he laughed once, a dreadful sound, and reached for the whiskey decanter. His hand never reached it. From the blackness beneath the desk, from the very shaft in which Poirot crouched, a hand appeared. It was gloved in pale kid, slender, unmistakably a woman's hand, and it held a small nickel-plated revolver. The barrel rose slowly until it pointed at Sir Reginald's temple. Poirot acted without thought. He flung the panel wide and launched himself forward, shoulder first, into the room. "No!" The shot exploded like a thunderclap of its own. Sir Reginald jerked backward, chair crashing over, blood blooming dark across his shirt front. The gloved hand vanished as swiftly as it had come. Poirot rolled, came up with the little automatic he always carried in London but had never expected to use in Wiltshire, and fired once into the mouth of the shaft. The bullet ricocheted with a vicious whine. Footsteps pounded in the corridor, doors slammed. Voices rose in panic. Poirot sprang to the desk and slammed the velvet box shut, thrusting it inside his coat. Then he knelt beside Sir Reginald. The baronet's eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling. Blood pulsed steadily from a neat hole just above the left ear. Yet when Poirot pressed fingers to the carotid, a faint flutter answered. "Alive," he whispered. "Mon Dieu, alive!" The study door burst open. Victor, coatless, hair wild. Colonel Blackwell clutching an old Webley revolver. Dr. Thorne in dressing-gown and slippers. Clara, white-faced beneath the paint, clutching Lady Amelia, who seemed on the verge of fainting. All crowded in, a tableau of shock and terror. "Lock the door," Poirot commanded. "No one leaves this room until I say." Victor found his voice first. "You shot him." "No, I shot at the murderer. See," he pointed to the open panel beneath the desk. "The assassin came and went by the old shaft. Sir Reginald is gravely wounded, but breathing. Doctor, attend to him at once." Dr. Thorne dropped to his knees, tearing open the blood-soaked shirt with practiced hands. Artery clipped, but the skull may have turned the bullet. We need hot water. Bandages. My bag. Go! Poirot snapped at the butler, who had appeared behind the others. "Bring everything! And telephone the village for a surgeon. No, 2 surgeons." While Thorn worked, Poirot turned to the others, eyes blazing. "Now we have attempted murder, in addition to theft. The Eye of Osiris is here." He tapped his breast pocket. "Safe for the moment, but the game changes. Someone in this room knows every inch of that shaft. Someone prepared the rope ladder. Someone fired the shot. And that someone believed Sir Reginald dead, and the sapphire gone forever." Clara gave a little screaming laugh. "You're mad! We were all in our rooms." "Were you?" Poirot's voice cut like a scalpel. "We shall see. Colonel, if you please, guard that panel. Shoot anything that moves in the shaft." Blackwell planted himself squarely, revolver levelled. Victor poured himself a stiff whisky with shaking hand. Lady Amelia sank into a chair, sobbing quietly. Poirot bent again over the wounded man. Sir Reginald's lips moved. The detective leaned close. "The combination!" The words were the merest thread. "Changed it. Yesterday. Only wrote it in my diary, under the blotter." His eyes closed. Poirot straightened slowly and looked at the desk. The sheet Sir Reginald had been writing on was blank, except for a single line in fresh ink. "Forgive me, Amelia. I should never have kept it." The diary lay half under the blotter, open at yesterday's date. A new combination was scrawled in the margin, 18 to 27 to 9 to 36. Poirot closed the book gently and slipped it into his pocket beside the jewel case. "So," he said softly, almost to himself, "the thief did not know the new numbers. After all, the shot was panic, not design." Dr. Thorne looked up, face grim. "He may live if we get him to hospital soon. The bullet grazed the brain, I think, but the bleeding—" A scream from the corridor cut him short. The butler stood in the doorway, face ashen, holding a silver salver on which lay a single sheet of papyrus. The crimson eye stared up at them all. A message had been scrawled beneath it in the same hurried hand. "Too late. The eye sees blood now. More will follow." Poirot took the papyrus, careful not to smudge the still wet ink. For the first time that night, his composure cracked. The little moustache quivered with something very like fury. "Enough," he said, and his voice rang against the panelled walls. "This ends tonight. You will all remain here under guard while I fetch what I need from my room. Then, mesdames et messieurs, we shall have the final reckoning, for Hercule Poirot has been patient long enough." He strode to the door, paused, and looked back once at the blood-soaked figure on the rug. "And the Eye of Osiris," he added quietly, "will watch every one of you until the truth is dragged into the light." Thunder crashed overhead, as though the storm itself applauded. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The study had become a battlefield infirmary. Sir Reginald lay on the leather chaise, unconscious, a white bandage already dark at the temple. Dr. Thorne knelt beside him, sleeves rolled high, issuing clipped orders to the white-faced maids who came and went with basins of steaming water. The air reeked of iodine, blood, and the storm's wet earth. Outside, the wind had dropped to an exhausted moan, as though the night itself had spent its fury and now waited, listening. Poirot stood at the window, back turned to the room, hands clasped behind him. The others sat where he had placed them. Victor in the armchair by the fire, whisky untouched now. Clara on the edge of a straight chair, arms wrapped around herself. Colonel Blackwell near the shaft opening, revolver still in hand. Lady Amelia on the sofa, eyes fixed on her husband's pale face, as though she could will breath back into him. No one spoke. The only sounds were the doctor's quiet movements and the occasional groan of the house settling. Poirot turned at last. In the green lamplight, his face looked carved from ivory, the eyes two bright black sparks. "Before the police arrive," he said, voice calm yet carrying to every corner, "it is necessary that the truth be spoken here, among ourselves. Sir Reginald may live or die. That is in other hands now, but the eye of Osiris will not leave this room again until its guardian is named." He drew the black velvet box from his pocket and set it on the desk beside the blood-stained diary. "Regard it well. Twice it has been stolen from a locked safe in a locked room. Tonight, someone tried to kill for it. Yet the method has been the same each time. The old shaft beneath the floor, the rope ladder, the slender arm that reached up to work the combination, a woman's arm, a woman's hand holding the revolver." Clara gave a strangled cry. Victor half rose, face livid. "You dare accuse—" "I accuse no one yet," Poirot cut in, raising a small hand. "I state facts. The footprints in the attic dust were made by a Louis heel. Size 4. The hand that held the gun tonight wore a pale kid glove, left-handed, with a tear at the base of the thumb. Exactly where Mademoiselle Beaumont tore her glove yesterday on the rose trellis in the conservatory." Clara stared at her hands as though seeing them for the first time. "But the combination," Lady Amelia whispered. "Only Reginald knew it. Until yesterday," Poirot agreed. "Yesterday he changed it and wrote the new numbers in his diary. Someone saw him do it. Someone who was in this room yesterday afternoon when Sir Reginald opened the safe to show the stone to his wife." He turned to Lady Amelia. She met his gaze steadily, though tears trembled on her lashes. "You were here, madame. You left the room immediately after. Yet you returned a few moments later, ostensibly for your handkerchief. Long enough to read the numbers upside down across the desk. You have excellent eyesight, I think." Lady Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came. Victor laughed harshly. "Amelia! She hasn't the nerve. Has she not?" Poirot's voice softened. "When a woman loves desperately, when she sees the man she adores destroying himself for a cursed stone, when she believes that stone is poisoning her marriage, then she finds nerve for anything." He moved to Clara. "You, mademoiselle, knew the house's secrets from childhood visits. You discovered the shaft years ago, playing hide-and-seek. You needed money. Yes, the theatre is expensive. But more than money, you needed drama. And you gave us drama in abundance." Clara's painted mouth twisted. "Prove it, little man." Poirot smiled without humour. "The bergamot in the ink, the jasmine on the papyrus, your perfume, mademoiselle, unmistakable. The torn glove, the attic footprints, the revolver, nickel-plated pearl handle, is in your dressing-table drawer at this moment, wrapped in a silk stocking. Shall I fetch it?" Clara's bravado cracked. She looked suddenly very young and very frightened. Colonel Blackwell stirred. "There's another possibility. The doctor. Thorne knows every cranny of this house. He's been treating the family for years, and he's left-handed." Dr. Thorne did not look up from his patient. "I have been attending a dying man, Colonel. Hardly the moment for burglary." "Yet you were seen in the West Wing corridor at 10:30, Poirot said quietly. "Carrying your bag, a bag large enough to conceal a rope ladder." Thorne's scalpel paused. "I was called to Lady Amelia. She had taken too much veronal in her distress." "Called by whom?" Poirot asked. Silence. Poirot turned at last to Victor. "And you, monsieur, have debts that would bankrupt a prince. You believed the eye would solve everything. You searched your uncle's desk only last week. I found the faint scratch on the drawer where your signet ring caught." Victor's face was slick with sweat. "I was looking for a check," not a jewel. Perhaps. Poirot stepped into the centre of the room. So we have motives in plenty, but only one person combined motive, opportunity, and, above all, the desperation to shoot when the new combination failed. He opened the velvet box. The sapphire blazed like a drop of frozen blood. Regard the eye. It is said to show the true heart of whoever looks into it. Let us test the legend. One by one he held the gem before each pair of eyes. Victor looked and laughed nervously. Clara looked and turned away with a shudder. Colonel Blackwell stared stolidly, then grunted, "Pretty enough, bauble." Dr. Thorne glanced up briefly, face unreadable. Lady Amelia met the stone's gaze longest. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I never wanted anyone hurt," she whispered, "only to be free of it. Reginald was obsessed. He said the eye was his immortality. I thought if it vanished, he would turn back to life. To me, Clara helped. She knows the old passages. We meant only to hide it until he agreed to sell. Then the letters began. We didn't write them. Someone else used our theft to threaten murder." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone else?" He swung suddenly to Dr. Thorne. "You, Doctor, you discovered the women's plan. You have treated Lady Amelia for months. You read the anguish in her pulse. You saw a way to possess the eye yourself, not for money, but for study. You are writing a monograph on ancient poisons, n'est-ce pas? The eye is reputed to bear traces of a rare lotus resin, priceless to science. When Sir Reginald changed the combination, you panicked. You followed Clara through the shaft tonight, meaning to take the stone after she opened the safe. But Sir Reginald was waiting. You shot in terror, believing he was already dead." Thorne rose slowly, blood to his elbows. "Clever," he said, voice steady, "but unprovable." Poirot reached into his pocket and produced the nickel-plated revolver, wrapped in a silk stocking. "Ballistics will prove it, Docteur, and your fingerprints are on the papyrus, bergamot ink stains beneath the nails. You used the women's plan as cover, then tried to turn it to murder." For a long moment, the only sound was Sir Reginald's shallow breathing. Then Dr. Thorne sighed, a sound of utter weariness, and let the scalpel fall from his fingers. "It was never about the stone itself," he said, "only what it could teach. I have spent 20 years chasing shadows in old books. One fragment of lotus resin would have made my name immortal. When I realized what the eye might contain," he looked at the unconscious man on the chaise, "I never meant him to die." Poirot's voice was almost gentle. "Yet you pulled the trigger." Outside, the first pale hint of dawn crept through the windows, turning the blood on the carpet black. Far down the drive came the sound of motor engines, police, surgeons, the world returning. Poirot closed the velvet box with a soft snap. "The Eye of Osiris has claimed its victim after all," he said quietly, "but not the one it intended." And in the cold morning light, the sapphire lay still, waiting for whatever darker heart would covet it next. Chapter 8. The Second Confession. The dawn that finally seeped through the study windows was the colour of dishwater. Sir Reginald had been carried upstairs on an improvised stretcher. The surgeons from Salisbury were bending over him now, their low voices drifting down the main staircase like smoke. In the study itself, the storm had left its mark. Puddles on the window-sills, the rug rolled back and darkened with blood, the air thick with carbolic and wet wool. Dr. Elias Thorne sat handcuffed to the heavy chair beside the cold fireplace, head bowed, spectacles reflecting the grey light in two blank circles. Poirot had not permitted anyone to leave. The local inspector, a large, slow-spoken man named Hurst, had arrived with 2 constables and a police surgeon, but Poirot had met them at the door, spoken a few quiet sentences in French that made Hurst's eyebrows climb, and been granted 1 more hour before formal statements were taken. The family and guests stood or sat where exhaustion had placed them. Victor slumped against the wall, coat unbuttoned, tie askew. Clara on the sofa, mascara streaked into bruises beneath her eyes. Colonel Blackwell rigid by the window, hands clasped behind his back as though on parade. Lady Amelia, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Poirot walked once around the room, hands behind him. Then stopped in front of Thorne. "You have confessed to the shooting, Docteur," he said, voice low but perfectly audible, "and the evidence supports it. The revolver, the bergamot on your cuffs, the lotus resin you hope to scrape from the setting. Yet certain details remain. Untidy. The little grey cells, they revolt." He turned to the others. "For example, the first theft occurred 3 nights ago, when the combination was still the old one, 180936. Dr. Thorne could not possibly have known it. Someone else opened the safe that night. Someone who left the papyrus and the crimson eye as a calling card." Clara made a small choking sound. Lady Amelia's head came up slowly. Poirot faced them. "Madame, mademoiselle, you believed your plan was harmless. Hide the jewel, frighten Sir Reginald into reason, restore it later when he promised to sell. A feminine conspiracy, almost touching. But you required a third person, someone to carry the sapphire away from the house, someone to post the anonymous letters from London, someone to return it when the moment was right." He paused. "That third person never intended to return it." Victor gave a harsh laugh. "You're saying we were all played for fools?" "Precisely, monsieur. The doctor discovered your little plot within hours. He has treated Lady Amelia for insomnia. He reads faces the way others read newspapers. He saw opportunity. He added his own letters, more violent, more terrifying. He waited until the night the combination changed, followed Mademoiselle Clara through the shaft, and attempted to seize the prize for himself. When Sir Reginald surprised him, he fired." Thorne lifted his head at last. His face was grey, the scholarly stoop more pronounced than ever. "Everything you say is true," he said quietly, "except the most important part. I did not fire the shot." A ripple ran through the room. Inspector Hurst stepped forward, notebook poised. Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Inspector. Let the doctor finish." Thorne's gaze moved to Lady Amelia. "I entered the shaft behind Clara, yes. I carried chloroform and a dark lantern. I intended only to render her unconscious, take the stone, and escape. But when I emerged beneath the desk, Sir Reginald was already slumped forward. The shot had been fired moments earlier, someone else entirely." He looked straight at Colonel Blackwell. "Someone who knew I would be blamed." The Colonel's face darkened to beetroot. "Damned scoundrel! I'll have you for slander!" Poirot's voice cut like a whip. "Colonel, you were with General Sir Hugo Hargrove in Egypt in 1898 when the eye was taken from the temple at Karnak. You signed the expedition ledger as witness. Your brother officer, Captain Reginald Hargrove, Sir Reginald's own father, died of a mysterious fever 3 weeks later. The natives spoke of the curse. You have spent 40 years trying to buy, borrow, or steal the stone to lay beside your brother's grave in Cairo, and still the family guilt." Blackwell's hand went to his breast pocket, instinctively, protectively. "You have sand in your cuffs from the western desert," Poirot continued relentlessly. "Real sand, not the builder's rubbish. You brought a pocketful home last year, wrapped in a twist of newspaper, meaning to scatter it over the grave when the sapphire was finally yours. I found the newspaper in your wastebasket, dated Alexandria, 1924. The Colonel's mouth worked soundlessly. You learned of the women's plan from Clara, your mistress for the past 6 months, though she believed it was only a harmless flirtation. You encouraged the mock theft, posted the letters yourself from London, and tonight you waited in the shaft with your service revolver. When Thorn appeared, you fired at Sir Reginald, knowing the doctor would be found with the smoking gun. Clara sprang up. "That's a lie! Marcus, tell them!" But the Colonel was staring at Poirot, as though at an avenging angel. "You knew the combination," Poirot said, softly, "because Sir Reginald trusted you. Old comrades shared memories of the desert. He showed you the safe only last month, boasting that no curse could touch him now. You repeated the numbers aloud, ostensibly admiring the mechanism. He never suspected." Blackwell's shoulders sagged. The military bearing collapsed like a house of cards. "I only wanted it for the grave," he whispered, "to give the boy peace. 40 years I've carried the guilt. The priest said blood must answer blood. I thought, if the stone lay with him—" His voice broke. Lady Amelia rose, blanket slipping from her shoulders. "You shot my husband for a superstition." Blackwell could not meet her eyes. Poirot turned to Inspector Hurst. "Colonel Marcus Blackwell, late of the 21st Lancers, is your man. The revolver will be found in the shaft, wrapped in oilskin, army habit. His fingerprints are on the papyrus fragments in his writing case upstairs. And the sand in his cuffs will match the sample I took." Hurst nodded to his constables. They moved forward. Blackwell offered no resistance. The fight had gone out of him the moment the desert sand was mentioned. As they led him away, he paused beside Poirot. "Tell Reggie. Tell him the curse ends here. The boy can rest now." Poirot regarded him for a long moment. "The curse was always in men's hearts, mon colonel, not in a stone." The door closed. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sound of the surgeon's footsteps overhead and the steady drip of rain from the eaves. Poirot opened the velvet box one last time. In the cold morning light, the eye of Osiris looked suddenly small, almost pitiful, no more than a blue shard of history stained with too much blood. He closed the lid with a soft final click. "Enough," he said to the room at large. "The frantic search is over." Chapter 9. The Last Twist. The house exhaled. That was the only way to describe it. Doors that had stood shut for 2 days now opened. Windows were thrown wide to let out the smell of blood and carbolic. Servants moved along corridors with the dazed relief of soldiers after an armistice. Upstairs, the surgeons had finished their work. The bullet had been extracted, the wound closed, and Sir Reginald Hargrove lay unconscious but breathing steadily, likely to live, scarred, perhaps weakened, but alive. Downstairs, Colonel Marcus Blackwell sat in the morning room between 2 constables, staring at the wall as though the desert had finally claimed him. Poirot had asked for the study to be left exactly as it was. He stood alone in the centre of the rug, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the scene with the air of a man who has solved a puzzle only to discover one piece still missing. The safe gaped. The shaft beneath the desk yawned like a grave. The blood on the carpet had dried to a dull brown. Everything fitted: motive, opportunity, evidence, confession. And yet the little grey cells refused to be silent. He walked once more to the desk, opened the diary again, and read the final entry written in Sir Reginald's hurried hand the previous afternoon. Combination changed. New. 1827, 936. If anything happens to me, Amelia must destroy the stone. It has brought nothing but misery. Poirot closed the book slowly. Something in the wording tugged at him. If anything happens to me, not if the stone is stolen again, but if anything happens to me. A man expecting death, not merely another theft. He knelt beside the shaft and shone his torch downward. The rope ladder still hung there, swaying gently in the draught. Halfway down, caught on a splinter of brick, fluttered a scrap of pale kid leather, the missing thumb from Clara's torn glove. He retrieved it carefully with tweezers and slipped it into an envelope. Then he noticed something else. A faint smear of fresh blood on the third rung, not Sir Reginald's, too high for the wound in his temple to have reached. Someone had cut themselves during the descent. Poirot climbed down himself, moving with the neat economy of a man who dislikes unnecessary exertion. At the bottom, he found what he expected. A small crumpled handkerchief soaked in blood, monogrammed E.T., Elias Thorne. The doctor had indeed been in the shaft, as he admitted. But the blood was on the wrong side of the ladder for a man climbing up behind Clara. It was on the side used by someone descending first. Poirot returned to the study, closed the panel, and rang the bell. When the butler appeared, pale and trembling, Poirot spoke quietly. "Ask Dr. Thorne to come here. Alone." Minutes later Thorne entered, wrists still cuffed, escorted by a constable who withdrew at Poirot's nod. The doctor looked 10 years older than the previous night. The scholarly stoop had become the sag of defeat. "You wished to see me, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot did not answer at once. He opened the velvet box, lifted the sapphire, and held it to the light. The crimson spark at its heart flared like a warning. "Tell me again, Docteur, exactly what you saw when you emerged from the shaft last night." Thorne's eyes fixed on the stone. "I have told you. Sir Reginald was already shot. The revolver lay on the rug. I picked it up, foolishly, to see if anything could be done. Then you burst in. And the stone? Still in the open box on the desk." Poirot replaced the sapphire and closed the lid. "You are lying, mon ami. The stone was not on the desk when I entered. It was already inside my pocket. I took it the instant Sir Reginald fell. You never saw it at all." Thorne's composure cracked. "Then how? Because you shot him before I arrived. You, and you alone." The doctor recoiled. Blackwell confessed. Blackwell confessed to everything except the shot. He believed he had arranged it, the letters, the terror, the shaft. But the final act was not his. Listen carefully. Poirot's voice became crisp, almost gentle. 3 nights ago, Lady Amelia and Clara stole the eye using the old combination. They passed it to you, their trusted physician, to hide until Sir Reginald agreed to sell. You saw the lotus resin, the monograph, immortality. You decided to keep it. You wrote the ransom notes yourself, increasing the terror. When Sir Reginald changed the combination yesterday and wrote the new numbers in his diary, you knew the women could no longer retrieve the stone for you. So you returned it to the safe last night, using the shaft so that Clara would come, open the safe again with the old numbers that no longer worked, and give you the perfect scapegoat. Thorne was very still. You waited below, Poirot continued. When Clara realized the combination had changed and panicked, you climbed up behind her. But Sir Reginald was already in the room, waiting with his own revolver. There was a struggle. You shot him with Clara's little nickel gun, the one you had taken from her room earlier to incriminate her. You wiped the handle, dropped it, and descended again, cutting your hand on the ladder in your haste. Then you waited for someone to discover the crime. Thorne's lips moved soundlessly. The beauty of it, Poirot said almost admiringly, was that Blackwell would hang. He had motive, opportunity, sand in his cuffs, everything. And you would walk away with the sapphire during the confusion, perhaps even finding it later and claiming the reward. He opened a drawer and took out the blood-stained handkerchief. Your monogram, Doctor, and your blood group, I have no doubt, when the police surgeon tests it. Thorne stared at the handkerchief as though it were a death warrant. It was never about the resin, he whispered at last. That was part of it. But Amelia? She came to me last month. She is dying, Poirot. Cancer. Inoperable. 6 months, perhaps less. She wanted the money from the sale of the eye to take her abroad, to Switzerland, one of those clinics. Reginald refused, said the stone was his legacy. She begged me to help her steal it, just long enough to force his hand. I agreed. Then I saw what the stone could do for science, and I could not let it go. His voice broke. I only meant to frighten him. The gun went off in the struggle. I swear it. Poirot regarded him for a long moment, the compassion in his eyes tempered by justice. You meant many things, Docteur, but a man is dying upstairs because of them. He turned to the door and called to the constable. Dr. Elias Thorne, I arrest you for the attempted murder of Sir Reginald Hargrove and for the theft of the Eye of Osiris. As Thorne was led away, head bowed, Poirot stood alone once more with the silent room. He opened the velvet box, looked at the sapphire a final time, and then, very deliberately, dropped it into the cold ashes of the fireplace and ground it beneath his heel. The stone cracked with a sound like a small bone breaking. He swept the fragments into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote across the front, to be placed in Sir Reginald's hand when he wakes. Only then did Hercule Poirot permit himself a small, tired smile. The curse is ended, he said to the empty air, and the frantic search with it. Chapter 10. The eye closes. 3 days later the rain had stopped, and a pale November sun lay across the lawns of Blackthorn Manor like a tentative apology. The police cars were gone. The journalists camped at the gates had been bought off with a carefully worded statement about a domestic tragedy now resolved, and the house itself seemed to breathe more slowly, as though it had been holding its breath since 1843. Sir Reginald Hargrove lay propped against a mountain of pillows in the great four-poster of the master bedroom, one side of his head swathed in white bandages, the other side still defiantly crowned with iron-grey hair. His eyes were open, lucid, and fixed upon the small envelope Poirot had just placed in his hand. "You are certain, Poirot?" His voice was thin, but the old authority lingered. "Certain it was Thorne?" "Certain." Poirot sat in the tapestry chair beside the bed, immaculate in a charcoal suit, the points of his moustache restored to their usual perfection. "He has signed a full confession. The magistrate will commit him for trial when you are strong enough to appear. The Crown will ask for attempted murder. His counsel will plead accident in panic. Either way, he will not practice medicine again." Sir Reginald turned the envelope over and over. "And the stone?" Poirot gave a tiny shrug that was almost Gallic. "Destroyed, irrecoverably. The fragments are inside. When you feel ready, you may scatter them in the rose garden or in the river, or keep them in a matchbox under your pillow. It is finished." A long silence followed. Outside, a gardener wheeled a barrow across the gravel. Rooks called from the elms. "I was a fool," Sir Reginald said at last. "All those years guarding a piece of blue glass as though it were the Holy Grail. My father warned me, his father before him. But pride is a stubborn thing." "Pride and fear," Poirot corrected gently. "Fear of the curse, fear of being the Hargrove who lost the family talisman. Fear is the true poison, mon ami. The sapphire was only the cup it was served in. Sir Reginald managed a wintry smile. And Amelia? Lady Amelia is with Dr. Marchmont in London. The specialist confirms what Thorn already knew. There are new treatments in Vienna. Radium, perhaps. Money will no longer be an obstacle. Poirot permitted himself a small, satisfied nod. The insurance on the eye was, after all, very generous. Sir Reginald's eyes filled. She thought I would rather let her die than sell. You thought she would rather see you ruined than part with a legend. Two proud people, each trying to save the other in the wrong way. It is a story as old as love itself. The sick man closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were clearer. Victor inherits nothing now, I suppose. The boy is a wastrel, but blood is blood. Will you speak to him for me, Poirot? Tell him the estate will be his one day, but only if he learns to live without curses, real or imagined. Poirot inclined his head. I will tell him. He is young. Youth recovers quickly when the shadows are banished. A soft knock announced Lady Amelia. She had travelled through the night and still wore her travelling costume of dove-grey wool, but her face had lost the brittle pallor of the last days. She came straight to the bedside, took her husband's hand, and pressed it to her cheek without a word. Tears fell, but they were the first quiet ones anyone had seen in that house for a very long time. Poirot rose discreetly and moved to the window. Below, in the rose garden, Clara Beaumont was walking slowly along the gravel paths, a coat thrown over her shoulders. Cigarette forgotten between her fingers. Colonel Blackwell had been taken to the county jail at dawn. The news that his confession had been only partial, that he had shielded Thorn out of some misplaced soldier's honour, had broken the last of Clara's theatrical poise. She looked small, almost ordinary, stripped of footlights and grease paint. Victor appeared from the stable-yard, hands in pockets, and hesitated when he saw her. After a moment, he walked over. They did not touch, but they stood side by side, watching the gardeners burn the last of the autumn leaves. Smoke rose pale against the pale sky. Poirot watched them for a while, then turned back to the room. "It is time I left you," he said. "The London train departs in an hour, and Hercule Poirot has kept the little grey cells idle quite long enough." Sir Reginald gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Stay another day. The Peacock Room is yours as long as you wish." Poirot smiled, the small, complacent smile that meant the universe had been restored to order. "Alas, I'm engaged to dine with a duchess who has lost a diamond necklace. One cannot disappoint a duchess." Lady Amelia came forward, eyes bright. "Then at least take this." She pressed a small velvet pouch into his hand. "From both of us. No curses attached, I promise." Poirot opened the drawstring. Inside lay a perfect pearl tie-pin, large, luminous, and flawless. "For services," she said simply, beyond the call of any detective. He bowed over her hand with antique grace. "Madame, you embarrass me, but I accept, on condition that you both promise me one thing." "Anything," Sir Reginald said, "that you will never again allow a stone, however beautiful, to stand between you and life." They promised. An hour later, the Rolls-Royce carried Poirot down the drive between the stone griffins. He sat very straight, gloved hands resting on the Malacca canes, pearl glowing softly against his charcoal cravat. As the car turned into the lane, he looked back once. Blackthorn Manor stood against the pale sky, no longer menacing, merely old and a little tired, like a dragon that had finally been persuaded to lie down and sleep. Poirot permitted himself a final, satisfied murmur. The frantic search is ended. The eye of Osiris is blind at last. He settled back against the leather, closed his eyes, and allowed the gentle motion of the car to lull him all the way to London, where new crimes, new passions, and new legends already waited in the fog.